Monday. Welcome to the Sweat, everybody, presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Lancia. This young lady is Jessie Cofield.
What?
Hi.
Did you just forget my name?
No, I did not. What's coming up on this show?
Wow. Emerson will remember the name of his co-host for the past, how many years? I don't even know. Anyway,
This is us.
we're going to talk about week 1 NFL DFS salaries, talk about the golf playoffs. We'll be talking St. Jude and the Women's World Cup, which no longer includes the U.S. Women's National Team.
The era is over.
Yeah.
History has been lost.
Yep.
The most disappointing performance ever by the U.S. Women's National Team.
They've never finished lower than third, and now here we are. But before all of that, we got to talk baseball. So let's bring in DraftKings contributors Tanner Kern and RotoWire's Paul Bruno. Thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you.
We'll roll through some DFS and sportsbook plays for today's slate.
Yep. Let's do it. First base, favorite DFS pitcher, Tan Man.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Freddie Peralta for $9,600. He's averaged just under 20 fantasy points per game in his past 10 starts. I think he's in for a huge night tonight. He does have some flaws. He can get hit around, but his elite strikeout ability is the reason to draft him. That's one thing I look for when I'm drafting a DFS pitcher. I want a guy that can get a lot of strikeouts because if they're going to give up hits, they're still going to score points with those swing and misses. He's got 20 strikeouts in his past 12 innings of work, and he's going to face the Rockies at home. They are 6th in most strikeouts per game in Major League Baseball, and Colorado's offense just hasn't been good on the road either this season. They're batting .240 with the 301 OBP. Their OBP at Coors Field is 325, so they can't figure out how to adjust to not playing at altitude. So this matchup has all the makings of a big DFS night for Freddie Peralta.
All righty, Paul. Tanner's spending $9,600 on his favorite pitcher. How much you dropping?
Well, I like that call, but I started to go further down the board, and I landed on the Angels' Pablo Sandoval. He comes into play for only $7,000 tonight, despite some pretty solid numbers in his recent starts, considering he's allowed a total of 7 earned runs in his last 4 outings, punctuated by 19 strikeouts over 22 and a third innings pitched. I also like the win probability here for him because the Giants squad is only scoring a shade over 3 runs per game in their last 9. So I'll save the $2,600 and go to the Angels starter tonight.
All right, second base, best DFS hitter, Paul. Who do you like?
I see that Christian Yelich is expected by RotoWire's DFS projections to be second most productive batter on the board tonight, Jesse, with about 11.5 points expected. He's actually been held hitless in his last 2 starts, and he's only gone hitless 3 starts in a row once this season. He's the most productive bat in this lineup, and he's been solid all season long. Give me the productive power batter who gets on base at a high rate every time. His ownership may be down a tick, but I'm going to take advantage. He costs $5,600 tonight.
All right, Tanner, best DFS hitter that you need in your lineup. Who is it?
So I wanted to go with Corey Seager in this spot, but he's got a lingering thumb injury. I'm still going to go with a Ranger here. I'm going to take Marcus Semien. He's going to face Ken Waldichuk, and this is an ideal matchup because Waldichuk just simply hasn't been that good. Semien's priced at $6,100, so a little high, but he is averaging 13.4 fantasy points in his past 10 games, and he's on a 7-game hitting streak right now. He's batting .409 with a 500 OBP and 5 homers in 6 games during the month of August. And you look at Waldichuk, he's 2-7 with a 6.5 ERA. He's got a whip right around 1.8. So between Waldichuk and the A's bullpen, I think the entire Rangers lineup has a huge night, but specifically Marcus Semien.
All right, let's poke over to the DraftKings Sportsbook right now, shall we? And tonight's main slate, 8 games. Give me, Tanner, your best game total bet, please, as we tackle third base.
So I'm staying in the same game, Rangers versus A's. I'm going to take the over of 8.5 runs here. As I just discussed, Ken Waldichuk isn't that good. I think he's going to get hit around a lot tonight, and he doesn't have an easy matchup against the Texas Rangers. They lead the league in batting average at .272. They're also first in runs scored, and they lead baseball in OBP at .342. The Rangers have been doing everything right at the plate, and I think that's going to continue tonight. And I wouldn't necessarily count the A's offense out entirely in this spot, so I do think they're going to contribute some runs to get to the over here. Dane Dunning's going to pitch for the Rangers. He has overperformed this season, but we're starting to see him slow down. In his past 30 days, he has a 4.76 ERA. He was right around a 2.5 to a 3 for the majority of the season, but that's starting to slip a little bit. So if the A's can contribute 3 runs tonight, this game gets over with ease. I still like it to get over if they give 1 to 2.
Paul, which game total you feel like betting tonight?
Well, I mentioned the Giants' recent offensive struggles earlier, Emerson. The Angels, for their part, have been similarly held in check over their six-game losing streak. I see low productivity continuing for both offenses, considering the fact that there's two solid starters going against each other. So I'll take the under 8.5 total here. In fact, maybe I'll be tempted even to go a run less to get a better payout on that one.
All right, best run line or money line bet, Paul. What are you looking at for this one?
I got a couple of games here, Jesse. Minnesota's the only AL Central club that's above 500, as we all know. The Tigers are second last in the majors in runs scored as well. The Twins have come in on a 4-game win streak, while the Tigers are just playing out the string, and they're giving up a ton of runs, almost 6 per game in their last 10 starts. I'll take the Twinkies minus 1.5 for a modest payout on the run line. To get a little bit better money, I might pivot to the Jekyll and Hyde Blue Jays, who are in Cleveland tonight, hoping to build on an impressive sweep over the Bo Sox. Sorry, guys, I had to mention that, which I enjoyed immensely, by the way. Buoyed by Davis Schneider, who did an imitation of Babe Ruth over the weekend. Very productive, historically productive debut for him, and a couple other bats finally coming alive in Springer and Chapman. I like their chances of extending that streak against a bad Guardians club that's looked anemic and losing 7 of their last 9 games. Take the visitors at plus 120 on the run line here.
All right, Tanner, best run line or money line bet, where are you going?
You had to bring up the Red Sox-Toronto series this weekend, Paul. I didn't even
Yeah,
get to
wow, Paul.
where there were 2 home runs hit this weekend. I was there Friday.
Hey, you guys swept us twice before. It's been no fun for us, believe me.
You're right. But I'm going to go with the Cubs. Plus money dog today. Very appealing on the road against the Mets. Neither pitcher's really been good in this spot. Drew Smyly's going to throw for Chicago. Kodai Senga is going to go for the Mets. Senga is a better pitcher overall on paper, but the thing that he really struggles with is his walk rate. It's through the roof. He's walked 55 batters in 110 innings, and I don't believe he's going to get a ton of run support to work with today. The Cubs have been hitting the baseball like crazy, and I think their offense is going to go out and win this game for them. They've scored 94 more runs in New York, and the Mets have faded totally this season. They're just 23-46 as favorites, so this is not a spot that I want to bet them in. The Cubs are 31-23 as dogs, and they took 2 of 3 over the weekend against the Braves, so they have a ton of momentum coming in the series, and I love them for plus money tonight.
All right, who do you love for a player prop, Tanner? Extra bases right now. We don't typically hit on this.
So I'm going back to Fenway Park right now.
Woo!
Brian Baker to record a win for plus 145. There's a few things that need to go right for this bet to hit. First thing is Bayo needs to go 5 innings and pitch well. I don't think that's going to be an issue against the Kansas City Royals. He's gone at least 6 innings in 9 of his past 10 starts, and all 9 of those starts have been quality starts for him. So he's been pitching really well. The Royals don't have a great offense. I know they won 7 games in a row heading into the weekend, but they're just 15-41 on the road this season, so that should tell you everything you need to know right there. And then the last part of this bet hitting is that Bayo needs to lead the game with the lead, and I think the Red Sox can do that. Can bounce back against Cole Ragans tonight. Ragans 3-3 with a 4.3 ERA and a 1.36 WHIP. He has walked 17 batters in 35 innings. So hopefully we see a little more fight out of the Red Sox in this series. It's definitely an easier matchup for them, and I think they're going to convert.
Yeah, I follow you on social. You've been big on the Bayo betting train lately, haven't you?
Yeah, massive. I mean, that prop, it's a little juice tonight because he is facing the Royals, but his over innings prop has been massive. It's been a really good bet.
All right, Paul, who are you targeting in the player prop department on the DK Sportsbook tonight?
This one's easy for me. There's actually plus money available for a pitcher to get the win against the terrible Oakland single A's, Emerson. I have to pick Texas starter Dane Dunning, who's been an inning eater for the AL West leading club. People are going to point to the A's and say they've won 2 in a row, though, but the Rangers have won 6 in a row. Take the 110 payout. It feels like the free spot on a bingo card for me.
All right.
Gentlemen, great work.
Good stuff.
It's a new night at Fenway, all right? It's going to be a different energy.
We'll see.
I'll be in the house sucking down some glizzies.
We'll see.
Enjoy.
Hang
Thanks,
tight, people. We are rolling through the wide receivers and tight ends with enticing salaries for week 1 of the NFL season. That's coming up next. All right, you are looking at the NFL Week 1 wide receiver DFS salaries. These are the top 5 most expensive guys. Everybody in the $8,000 range except for Devontae Adams down there, sneaking in at $7,900. So do you need to have one of these guys in your lineup for Week 1? I don't know, but you know who does. DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich and Steve Buchanan. Fellas, thank you for being here. So we saw those top 5 price guys. We talked about most of their quarterbacks on Friday. So who's the pick of these top 5 guys for Week 1? Jeff, who would you roll with?
I mean, obviously all these guys have appeal, but to me, I think the matchup, it got to look Tyreek Hill's way. I mean, again, Justin Jefferson's great. He's good, pretty good matchup against Tampa. But I mean, Tyreek Hill going up against the LA Chargers here. We're talking about the game with the highest game total on the slate in terms of the DraftKings Sportsbook. So right away, we're probably going to get a really good fantasy environment. And hey, you look at the Chargers, they do have some good corners, obviously. They were actually pretty good against wide receivers in terms of limiting fantasy points. But you also saw Tyreek Hill absolutely destroy this team late in the season last year. And again, if Miami is down a corner as well, and the Chargers are going to be airing it out, there's going to be a lot of points. There's just going to be more opportunity for Tyreek Hill. So to me, you look at these top players. Chase, I think Burrow is going to be fine, but I just don't really like the matchup against Cleveland at all there. Jefferson is fine. Kupp is still coming back from injury. I actually really like Cooper Kupp if we can get a clean bill of health. But I think Tyreek Hill is potentially in for a big Week 1. I think Miami's going to have to pass the ball to keep up in this game. And I think Hill maybe even the lowest owned of these sort of top 4 or 5 players. So give me some Tyreek Hill there at 8,400. I think he's going to be a good play for Week 1.
All right, Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of aligned here with Jeff here, going up against a Chargers secondary that's, coming into the season probably good, but not great. I mean, I think they're really going to be banking on the health of J.C. Jackson, and that really is the biggest question mark for the secondary this upcoming year. And like Jeff mentioned here, Week 14, Hill, 4 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown in that game against the Dolphins for 24 DraftKings fantasy points. And really, that was the only bright spot for the Dolphins in that game. Tua only completed 10 of his pass attempts in that game. Like, it was a brutal game for that offense, but Hill was able to still kind of persevere and still come out of a good game out of that one. So out of those guys, I think Hill is the number 1. I think Justin Jefferson's pretty close number 2 there, but obviously he's the most expensive guy there at 8,800. So I think Hill, a couple of $100 less in salary. I think he's the guy here for Week 1.
All right, Bukes, let's see. We got about 4 wide receiver 2s priced over $6,500 here. Waddle, Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Tyler Lockett. Which one are you looking at as the secondary options here to save?
I really like Geno Smith in Week 1, and I'm obviously just going to pair him with some of those Seahawks receivers. So Tyler Lockett is obviously somebody you would be going with here. The Rams have one of the biggest question marks in the secondary heading into this season. I mean, look at all the guys that they lost in the offseason. They lost Jalen Ramsey, David Long, Hill, Taylor Ramp, Nick Scott. All of these guys are no longer with this team, and they drafted 2 corners during the draft, so a massive amount of uncertainty coming into this year of how they're going to be able to perform, and they have to go up against a good offense here in Week 1. So I think it just gives Lockett, Metcalf some really strong matchups to consider here in Week 1. So I think Lockett is a really easy one to go with this one here. It was always kind of that guessing game. Who's going to be the wide receiver 1 this week? Is it going to be Lockett? Is it going to be Metcalf? But even with that, Lockett averaged over 7 targets per game last year. I think he's an easy click in that range for salary.
All right, Jeff, is there an easy click for you in this range?
I mean, I don't love this range, to be honest, but mainly because I just think that the guys in the 6 to 6,500 range are just very comparable to everyone over 6,500, and I just think that you're getting them for cheaper. But at the same time, these are all terrific players. Any one of them could really break the slate when you think about it. I actually like Steve's call of the Seahawks. I kind of like Tyler Lockett as well. I think he's going to be lower owned than DK Metcalf for Week 1, but I'll throw out Devonta Smith as another potentially just low-owned player in this range who may just get ignored because he's 7,200 instead of 6,500. Devonta Smith going up against, obviously, the Patriots Week 1. The Patriots tend to be very good at shutting down one player, like wide receiver 1. It's probably going to be obviously Antonio Brown, AJ Brown. So Devonta Smith, I think, is going to be in a potentially great spot just to benefit from that. We saw Smith and Jalen Hurts obviously have a really good connection, especially towards the end of last year. I think Smith is kind of just an underrated player for fantasy right now. I think there's definitely a scenario where he not only out-targets Brown, but he potentially outproduces Brown this year. And it's these type of matchups where the other team really going to be focusing on locking down A.J. Brown, and then Devonta Smith just kind of runs wild. So I look at this as a pretty good matchup for him, potentially, especially just as a low-owned play in DFS. And for this range, I mean, again, it's not my favorite range, but I think if you're picking out a lower-owned player there, Devonta Smith's going to make a lot of sense for big GPPs for week 1.
All right, 3 of the higher-priced wide receivers going to be taking their first snaps for their teams in week 1, okay? So Hopkins, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley.
Oh.
Any of these dudes in a matchup, you'd consider any of them at that price tag, Jeff?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we can consider these guys. Again, we're getting into the sort of range here where, yeah, again, it's a lot cheaper. It's easy to take, a shot with some of these guys. I mean, DJ Moore week 1 against, Jari Alexander, not exactly my favorite, but I mean, Calvin Ridley week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, I've already talked about what Anthony Richardson may be doing this year. And if he really does, sort of put the Jacksonville Jaguars on their back heels, it's only going to mean good things for their passing offense, potentially for Trevor Lawrence as well. So, yeah, there's obviously a little bit of risk with Ridley. He hasn't played in a year. It's a new team. It's a new system. But we're also talking about a guy who is pretty much like a top 10 wide receiver, like a perennial wide receiver, like 10 or better in terms of fantasy finishes. I think Calvin Ridley at 6,500 is going to be just fine. And I think this matchup for week 1 is potentially one of the best as well. So you look at the fact that, again, it's going to be a good fantasy environment. He's on a good team. He's got a great quarterback attached to him. The rewards outweigh the risk here for me. So 6,500, my target here is Calvin Ridley, especially in this week 1 environment, which I think is going to be a really, really good fantasy one.
Smart man.
Yeah, Steve, you look like you liked that Calvin Ridley pick.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, without a doubt, too, because it's not like Ridley's coming back from an injury. He's coming back from some off-field stuff, So it's not like he has to work his way back. I mean, granted, he has to get back into game shape and all that, but it's not like he's been, held down by an injury. I think the Jaguars are going to absolutely pick apart this Colts secondary. If you look at what they were running out there last year, Stephon Gilmore, Rodney McLeod, both of those guys are out of the mix this season. Gilmore's with the Cowboys, McLeod's with the Browns, and Ridley has been getting so much praise in camp for how he's looked and him separating himself from Christian Kirk, from what's most likely going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. I know as of this moment he's dealing with a toe injury right now, but when does week 1 roll around? I mean, 6 weeks from now, I think we can, get that right before week 1 rolls around here. But if you're stacking Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley, we're talking about $13,000 total in salary. This is a really friendly stack that you can get in a game that could easily be one of the more higher scoring games on this slate. So Calvin Ridley at 6,500, you're not really getting that discount where you'd like for guys who haven't been playing last year, but I think this is still a great spot for Ridley and stacking him with Trevor Lawrence at really a reasonable salary.
Yeah, because he's already out there looking active on Monday morning at practice. I think he just needed to change his cleats. It was like a cleats issue with his toe. So both you guys absolutely nailed that pick. And you get my stamp of approval. We put the graphic
Thanks.
on Friday. I believe you guys also talked a lot about some quarterbacks with new teams in new roles, bunch of receivers too that are bunched right around $6,000 for week 1 with those new quarterbacks and guys who are having new roles there under center. Evans, Godwin, McLaurin, Olave, Pittman, Christian Watson. Which one of those dudes land in your lineup, Steve?
It's hard to get away from really both Godwin and Evans. I mean, these guys are really relatively cheap from where they were during the regular season last year. I mean, Godwin's at 5,900, Evans at 6,300. I mean, both of these guys at some point last season were over 7K in salary. So you're looking at these guys and you go, man, it's really going to be tough to get away from them. The only problem now is that who's going to be throwing them the ball? Is it Baker Mayfield? Is it Kyle Trask? One of those guys is going to be under center. Now, the early word here is that Baker Mayfield has the one up on Trask, so it is what it is there. But, they're going up against a Vikings defense that really struggled last year, allowing the second most passing yards in the league. Now, they did make some moves to kind of improve on that. So I'm really hesitant to go with somebody who's going to be catching passes from Baker Mayfield most likely. But again, the salary just really works even with that downgrade at quarterback. Like I mentioned, Godwin, 59, Evans, 6,300. So I think those are going to be guys that a lot of people are going to be gravitate to, especially in tournaments. It's not going to be pretty. You're going to be gritting your teeth while you're watching this game, but it's just too cheap for the upside that both of these guys possess.
All right, Jeff. Christian Watson apparently looks pretty good, has a good rapport already with Jordan Love. I know that's the direction you're going. It has to be.
I mean, I like everyone in this range. It's a little bit scary. And yeah, Christian Watson looks good. He always looks good. He looked good all the last year when he was healthy, and Aaron Rodgers remembered he was on the field. He is just going to be a very good player. I like Godwin as well as a guy who just a complete target magnet who wasn't even 100% last year coming back from the ACL. The quarterback issue is a little bit of a risk. The best play here, though, is Chris Olave. I mean, you're going to hear me talk about Chris Olave a lot coming into week one. He's had the full offseason with Derek Carr. There's been no issues in Saints training camp. This is a team with a good O-line. This is a team with a full stack of running backs. I know Alvin Kamara's not going to be there week one, but that probably only bumps Chris Olave up for week one as well because the targets are now going to be spread out more to wide receivers. He's got the best matchup as well because Tennessee's secondary is terrible. Funnel to the pass defense always has been under Mike Vrabel. And Derek Carr is a quarterback who I think can take advantage. You put him behind a solid offensive line, a solid defense. It's not going to have him down 21 points after the first quarter. I think that Chris Olave here can absolutely go off for week one. So he's my favorite play, but certainly Christian Watson. The Bears secondary still has question marks. Yes, they're an improved defense, but Christian Watson can go off. Godwin. This is what I'm talking about. When you look at this range between like 6K, 6,500, or even lower, I mean, some of these names, absolutely. Not only are they in good matchups, but they're really high-end players. So for me, it's Olave, number one, but certainly Watson, Godwin right behind as well.
All right, how about a rookie wideout? So the first rounders have some pretty decent price tags if you're looking here. Jordan Addison, the highest at 5,100. Yep. Jeff, he could get some serious looks with defenses, focusing on Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba, especially in the early going. I just don't think people are really counting on how difficult it may be to just earn big target shares for these players. It's not that they're not good or that they can't go out there and earn it, but my God, you're talking about Jordan Addison with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and let's not forget, Kirk Cousins' kind of go-to slot guy now, KJ Osborne. I mean, you're relying on a lot there from Kirk Cousins to all of a sudden then feed Jordan Addison enough as well. Addison could get there, so could Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I would be looking down further, quite frankly. If you're looking at rookies, I think Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers are the real go-to guys because I don't know if either of those guys need big targets to go off. They're under 4,500. They've got elite quarterback play. And I mean, again, at that price, they've got the profile where they can go for a 60-yard touchdown. They could potentially get 100 yards on 4 catches. So for me, if you're paying for a rookie in week one, you want to take a shot with the cheaper players, the guys who could go off on just limited targets, because I don't really want to roster Addison or JSN until I know what their target share is going to be. If they're out there and they're earning targets right alongside those elite wide receivers, sure, we can play in week two, but I don't think you need to take the risk on Addison or JSN week one personally.
Steve, you want to roll down the board, don't want to pay for one of those more expensive rookies?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Jeff kind of nailed it here, especially with Flowers at $4,000. I mean, $1,100 less than Addison. Flowers really seems like he's carved a starting role alongside Odell Beckham Jr. for an offense that is going to be throwing a lot more than they have in the past. This is why they got Lamar Jackson, these type of weapons. And, Rashad Bateman's still on the PUP list, hasn't even practiced yet. He's dealing with that foot injury. They don't know if he's going to be ready for week one. Even if he is, how healthy is he going to be? So I think Flowers at 4K is just one that you really don't want to pass up with the way that he's been getting rave reviews in camp. He's been moving well. He's very explosive, what they're saying as well. So I just think Flowers at 4K, he doesn't have to do much to return value on that type of salary. And he feels like one of those guys that if he truly is going to be as good as they're saying in camp, you're never going to see him at this price range again. Maybe you still will in week two, but if he starts making a lot of noise early, this is somebody who's easily going to jump up in salary. So I think you just got to take the discount here, go with Flowers in that week one matchup against Houston.
Speaking of discounts, Steve, before you take off, I know we've talked to Jeff and Pierce about it, but what's your approach here to tight end week one? Travis Kelce not on the main slate, so top dogs here. Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, we know all whom have proven capable of 40-point explosions, or do you go down to that $3,000 range?
Yeah, going all the way down to the 3K range. I think Logan Thomas is in play here at 3,200. He's somebody who actually could get cut by the Commanders because he does have a big salary coming up now and guaranteed of $6.2 million. But if you look at the depth behind him, there is no competition to catch any passes behind him. I mean, it's John Bates, Cole Turner, Curtis Hodges. There's nobody there. Now they're going up against what was one of the worst defenses against the tight end position in the Arizona Cardinals. I think Logan Thomas, if he's on this team when week one rolls around, I mean, he could easily be someone that not only is going to go overlooked, but doesn't have to do much to get back that salary, especially with how low that he's priced. And this is someone who, when he was healthy, he was getting a lot of targets, especially in the red zone. So I think him at 3,200 is a really strong consideration for a tight end group that, unless you're paying up, pardon me, unless you're paying up, there really is nobody attractive to look at in that lower range. I think he's going to be the guy here at tight end for me.
Jeff, give me your take again on the tight end position week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just to add to that Logan Thomas pick, if Brissett starts, I think that's a big bump up for Logan Thomas. So just a note on that. I like Greg Dulcich at 4K flat. Again, everyone's talking about this revamped Broncos offense, and I do think it's going to be a lot better, but like you can get some exposure to it pretty cheaply for week 1 for a guy who I think could potentially be maybe not their top wide receiver, but like a 1A to like Jerry Jeudy. Like I do think Greg Dulcich has that kind of potential. We saw last year, like really good, like air yards just after the catch. He really does profile as a tight end who I think can do it all. And he's working now with a head coach who loves to use those big tight ends, or at least he did when he had Jimmy Graham. So I think Dulcich week 1 against the Raiders, who again, just not a good cover team. Don't bring pressure. It's probably going to be a soft spot for Wilson to just get off and start with a good game. I think Greg Dulcich week 1, 4K flat, is not going to break the bank. And again, just a player with a lot of upside on a tight end slate where, again, like the top options are good, like Andrews, like Hawkinson, but I think paying down here for week 1 is definitely probably the play for me.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate it. Jeff, stick around. Jason Sobel going to join you next to take a look at the FedEx St. Jude Championship coming up and recap how it all shook out with the playoff bubble, including that heartbreaking moment with JT.
All right, we had that drama, Mama, final PGA Tour event before the playoffs at the Wyndham Championship. Lucas Glover, you can see on your screen, pre-tournament 112 was his ranking in the FedEx Cup. Postseason starts this week. Top 70 players get in. He won the damn thing, moving him up to 49 in the rankings, punching his ticket to the postseason. Jeff Ulrich has returned. Jeff, there was around like a 2 hour and 3 or 4 minute rain delay at one point. All this guy needed coming out of that to secure his 2-stroke victory was 4 pars. Like, what can you say about his performance over the weekend? That was good for him, heartbreaking for others.
It was a good performance by Lucas Glover, but like let's be clear. I mean, Russell Henley gifted this event to Lucas Glover on the final 4 holes. He had a 14-foot putt for eagle, missed it, still birdie, took a 1-shot lead, and then inexplicably semi-shanked an iron on the 16th, almost hit his drive out of bounds on the 17th and 18th, and just went bogey, bogey, bogey finish. I think the rain delay probably hurt Russ. I mean, it's no excuse. You can't take a 1-shot lead and then just hit like 3 bad shots, but clearly it affected him a little bit. It was definitely another choke job. Unfortunately, Russell Henley played extremely well, but Glover was opportunistic. He was just very consistent down the stretch. And look, his approach game, Lucas Glover, it was basically the best in field. And that's what you have to do on these short little courses. If you can just hit it to 15 feet on every hole, which is pretty much what Lucas Glover was going to do, you're going to sink some putts at some point. So Glover deserved it. It just speaks again to the setup at Wyndham, where any kind of veteran player who's just consistent off the tee, hitting fairways, and has that approach game going, they can win. Brandt Snedeker did it. Davis Love the third one here at 51. Lucas Glover obviously up into his 40s now. He did it as well. So it's a real veterans track, and not really shocked that a guy like Glover won when you really sit back and kind of look at the profile winners we've had.
All right, well, bubble watch, okay, here. Lots of dudes on the bubble. Did not do enough to get in, did not get it done. Check out what JT did on 18 when he knew he needed his chip in to make the playoffs. Oh, my God.
Like, he finished the season in like the worst possible position. That was 71. He was standing there on the tee box, Jeff, on 18 at 11 under par. He needed one more birdie to crack the postseason here. And he managed to spin his second, or that was his third shot.
Right there. And then it was a great chip, and it just didn't work.
It came millimeters from dunking.
Yeah.
You know who would have made that shot? Phil Mickelson, because he would have sent his caddy up there to take the flag out. Come on, JT. You're going to be like Phil. I'm just kidding, obviously.
But I mean, like.
But seriously, I mean, I do think the flag stick, if it goes out, it probably goes in. It is heartbreaking, man. I mean, look, here's the thing for Justin Thomas. I mean, he put himself in that situation, right? I mean, he didn't perform in the majors. He didn't really play a full fall schedule, and he just could never pick it up. So, I think Thomas. Yeah, so back to Justin Thomas. I mean, obviously heartbreaking miss there, but kind of dug his own grave, just the way he played all season. And again, like this bubble thing is interesting though, because you had guys like Adam Scott and Shane Lowry also miss, also like right on the direct bubble.
Wait, Jeff, the number of times we saw Adam Scott on your
Yeah.
betting card, I thought he was in the
Bro.
top 10. I thought.
And he went 63 yesterday, Jeff. And he, you know what? The only position worse than 71, one spot out, is 2 spots out, and that's where Adam Scott finished.
I was with you. Like, I didn't even think Adam Scott was on the bubble until I looked on Sunday. That's how I just thought he was comfortably in like 50th or something like that. So Adam Scott being there, I do think it speaks to the PGA has already addressed this. I think they've given too much weight to those fall series events when guys like Scott and Lowry typically don't play. Then they have to make up points. I mean, Scott had a pretty solid season, man. I mean, so did Shane Lowry, really, when you look at the majors and stuff like that. So those 2 guys finished. I think next year those guys would be in a different spot with the way that now it's just going for the full calendar years counting. But yeah, it was like Scott finishing with a 63 and still not making it. That to me is almost a bigger story than Thomas, because I feel like Scott had a pretty solid year and probably deserves to be in there.
I think he's only one of 2 dudes who has been in the postseason like every year. So the first time I think he's missing out. It was Horschel, the other guy. Dude, it was almost Billy Ho season. Let's be real, okay?
It was. It's, you know, admittedly, Billy Ho is starting to play a little bit better. Look, this has been his bread and butter time. So don't be shocked if you see Billy Horschel show up at one of these events. He's played very good at East Lake if he gets there. Maybe a good dark horse there if he finishes, if he gets into the top 30, potentially even for that. So, Billy Horschel obviously, playing better, but just, player to watch going into the fall too.
All right. Well, I'm happy to welcome in Jason Sobel to the party, and it's perfect timing as we kind of transition over to the St. Jude this week. And despite only playing, 3 events in the last 60-plus days here, Jason, Jon Rahm still in first place, Scheffler in second. They have a clear, comfortable lead over third place. That would be Rory McIlroy. So we're going to see them here over the next 3 events. Yeah, Jon Rahm's won 4 events this season, 4 tournaments, but there are more changes on the horizon, Jason. I know you're on top of everything that the PGA Tour is going to be announcing and all of the schedule information that has leaked up to this point. But is the playoff format, in your opinion, something that needs to change even more?
Yeah, Emerson, you make a good point because, quite frankly, there's a lot of things on the table right now for the PGA Tour that are probably being prioritized over changing the playoff format. Remember, this is going to be the first year that there's only 70 players in the FedEx St. Jude this week, 50 next week in the BMW, 30 as usual at the Tour Championship. So they've already made that change. As far as other changes coming down the road, I know a lot of people don't like the staggered scoring start going into the season finale. I can see that changing at some point. But quite frankly, like I said, there is so much going on in PGA Tour headquarters right now, so much taking place in the world of golf that I've got to think any changes to the playoff format are very low on the priority list right now.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff Ulrich, what would you change if you haven't had an opportunity in order to make the playoffs, the postseason, maybe a little more interesting? Again, like Jason said, I know it's probably very low on the priority list considering everything else going on in the world of golf right now.
Look, to be fair to the PGA Tour, I actually like some of the changes they made. Like, I think going to the full calendar year and only counting that calendar year for the FedEx Cup makes sense. I think cutting it down from 70 to 50 to 30 made sense as well. I like that. Then you have the guys between 70 and 125 fighting it out in the fall. It just makes the fall series actually mean something. What I would change is I would change how East Lake is done. I would make East Lake a 3-round stroke play event. And then I would take the top 8 finishers maybe, put them in match play to decide it all. What wouldn't be better than seeing 2 guys go head to head for $10, $15 million? That's what the PGA should be promoting. And the match play format is the most exciting in golf. Why not throw a little match play in there at the end to spice things up? I think the PGA should look into something like that. I would certainly explore that option if I was in charge, which I'm not.
Man, if only.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a couple weeks, Jeff, when we do head to Atlanta. Okay?
Ooh,
so
okay.
I like that idea.
Well, we also talked about how we haven't seen much of Rahm since June here. So does golf have maybe like a bit of a load management issue here with the new schedule and elevated events? I mean, 17 events this year for Rahm, 15 for Rory, even only 19 for Xander, and he hasn't had a win this year. to coast on the FedEx points. Jeff, what do you think about this strategy from guys?
I think that what you're seeing is just that, yes, the PGA unfortunately has watered down their project a little bit, their product a little bit. You know, what we've seen in the summer too is a lot of these guys haven't played for a bit. Like you said, Jon Rahm hasn't played for a bit. And it's because of, unfortunately, it's because of some of the events we're getting and some of the locations we're getting. The 3M, like the Detroit Rocket Mortgage, these are just very plain vanilla golf courses to travelers, unfortunately, that I don't think really draws a ton of interest from the players. And I think that the PGA needs to, what they need to do is they need to get a little bit better, higher end venues that's going to draw the eye of some players, you know, just a little bit more, just tougher really when it comes down to it. Something that's going to really challenge the players, get the event on their radar, and then just try and focus more on there. So, you know, again, I do think they've addressed some of this with the new schedule and trying to make them, 70-man events and stuff like that. I don't really like the no-cut aspect. I would rather have full-cut events, but at the same time, taking out that fall series and not letting it count for the new calendar year, I think that's going to mean something. I think it may actually work to just cut down the schedules of the top players a bit, but I would really like to see the PGA Tour revamp this summer schedule, get a couple tougher courses in there, get a marquee event that just throws in there on the calendar. I think that would also change the schedules up for the players a little bit as well.
And Jason, let's keep in mind too, I believe playing requirements are out the door now. So basically those who wish to play in these big events can do so, while those who wish to pass up the sizable purses can also do so in peace without being penalized.
I would love to see the look on the face of a PGA Tour executive sitting in Ponte Vedra Beach headquarters right now, who's got to be saying, wait, you guys all said you wanted the best of the best playing against each other more often. That's exactly what we did this year. We gave you all these designated events. Now you're like, yeah, but we don't get to see them enough. And, you know, maybe we have a problem. And they're like, wait, what are we supposed to do? And so I can understand the frustration, if there is some, on their level, because quite frankly, you're not going to get, until you tell the players, hey, you have to play 27 weeks out of the year. You have to play every single week. This is going to be like NASCAR. And if there's an event, you have to be there. It's not going to happen. Quite frankly, there's another outlet over there. If they'd like to go play another tour, they could be talked into going to play another tour out there that the PGA Tour doesn't want them to go play. So they have to be very careful right now in trying to keep their players, trying to appeal to their players while also trying to appeal to the fan base. It's not easy. I say it all the time. There's this prioritization level. I said the same thing about the prioritizing as far as the playoff formats and other things going on in the game right now. There's a prioritization level amongst the PGA Tour executives right now. You've got to think about your TV rights holders. You got to think about the sponsors. You got to think about your membership. You got to think about, well, yeah, that's right, the fans at some point. Mm-hmm. The fans are not going to be on top of that scale. So whether it's Jeff talking about match play for the Tour Championship, great idea. TV hates it because if you get two guys that aren't necessarily Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler or Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth, it could be a death knell for TV. And so that's why they haven't done something like that. But the priority order is not going to put the fans on top of that list. And so even though the fans would love to see the best of the best playing every single week, there are specific reasons that it's not happening right now, and it probably won't happen moving into the future either.
Well, Jay, let's move ahead to, speaking of the future, this week, the St. Jude FedEx Classic here in Tennessee. So who is someone right now you believe can put themselves in a good position with a couple more postseason events ahead? Or is this going to be somebody, further down the board and not near the top of the betting board?
So I went down the list, and last week we had 20 players who were 50-1 or shorter. And we've seen 3 straight long shots. Brian Harman, Lee Hodges, and Lucas Glover win golf tournaments. And I think a lot of people out there are going, all right, I've got the trend. I'm going after a big number. Well, this week there are, let's see, I'm doing the math quickly in my head, 86 fewer players, but 5 more who are 50-1 or shorter. What that means is, of course, there's just not as many chances to go after those big numbers. So I think it's going to be someone, if not one of those players at the top of the board, because I do believe that Jon Rahm, Scottie Schefflers, and Rory McIlroys understand the next 3 weeks are more marathon than sprint. They don't have to necessarily go out and win this one to go win the FedEx Cup. They might be just kind of waiting the weeds a little bit. But I do think that it's going to come from somewhere not too far down the board. So if you're looking for another big-time long shot like we had the last 3 weeks, I don't know that this is the week for it.
Jeff, how important is it to maybe just not overthink it this week?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, this is a tricky little course, lots of water. We almost saw Sepp Straka win at big odds at this event last season. So certainly, like, if you're going to see a long shot winner, it's probably going to become this week. I think Byung-Han An is playing extremely good golf right now, and if you're looking for a player who maybe just could rise up in this field, catch some of these top players off guard, I really wouldn't be shocking if it was him. But I think another sort of mid-range player, you call him mid-range now, we've seen him play with the elites. Sung Jae Im is starting to get it together a little bit. He was 20th at the Open or 23rd at the Open, in that range. Played a little bit better last week, T14. I like the fact that he's been playing. I think that gives him a better shot for this week. I don't necessarily like him to win the FedEx Cup, but for this week, the fact he's got a little bit more competitive practice than these other top players who are coming in cold, I think it's also a good course for Sanjay. He's a really good Bermuda putter. His putter was really good last week. The approach game just takes his tick up. I think Sung Jae Im is the kind of player in this field who could just, rise up for that 1 week, catch the rest of the field off guard.
All right, let's just go ahead here, Jason. Who is your bet to win?
Yeah, so I'm starting the card at 25-1, and I'm going to go with Colin Morikawa. You look at somebody who can mirror what Will Zalatoris did in victory last year, which is world-class ball striker who can putt above his usual baseline. Morikawa actually, in finishing in a share of 5th last year, putted a little bit better than Zalatoris, so we've seen a spike week for him on TPC Southwind already, and so Morikawa is a guy that's been playing well enough to go out and win, just hasn't done it yet this year. I like the players who are still hungry enough, who have played good golf and haven't won yet. I think those are the guys I'm targeting. Tommy Fleetwood is right there. Same number, though. Not as much win equity as Colin Morikawa. And a little bit further down the board, I think Sam Burns. Again, Jeff talked about Sung Jae Im on Bermuda greens. Sam Burns loves Bermuda greens. I can see Sam Burns this week as well. So those are going to be the 3 players that'll be on my card this week.
All right, Jeff, who's the bet to win?
Yeah, I mean, same kind of thought process as Jason. I mean, I'm certainly going to be targeting that range with Fleetwood and Morikawa. But I do like Sung Jae Im. He's going to be on the card as well. I think he's a player who has not won. Yes, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but I like the way he's looked in 2 of his last 3 starts. I think Sung Jae is just a quality enough all-around player that he could get it done at a course like this. So Sung Jae Im will be my sort of mid-range pick, but I think this is going to be a little bit wide open. I think it's going to be, again, we've seen playoffs at this event each of the past 2 years, this course, I should say, and I think it's going to potentially be another one, a really close down the stretch.
All right, gentlemen, a successful golf segment indeed. 0 success for the women's national team in Australia at the World Cup in the knockout round. We're going to dive into it next. What's next for the Americans with Chinmay Vaidya coming up.
Going. Heartbreak for the U.S. women's national teams as they are eliminated from World Cup play in PKs at the end of full time. It did not go their way. It was particularly brutal because the U.S. women's national team goalkeeper, it looked like she had saved Sweden's final PK, but in fact it was ruled in by I don't know, an inch, a millimeter?
Maybe, yeah. Millimeter's a big word in this show today.
Yeah, okay. DraftKingsNetwork.com's Chinmay Vaidya is here. Chinmay, absolute heartbreak for Team USA. We knew, obviously, that this team was going to have some challenges. People were not high on them at the end of last week. But they barely made the knockout stage. I mean, out in the round of 16, I think they had never finished lower than third place.
The worst finish
in a
ever.
World Cup
this was the worst team ever in U.S. women's national team history.
What happened? What happened here? Because I've seen some talk on Twitter from some soccer analysts saying basically that this squad was just never poised to make a run, and that there was maybe some politics that went into who made the team.
I disagree with that. I believe that this U.S. team, or the U.S. team, has always played to a level of merit. I don't believe that there was ever any doubt as to who made the team. And you looked at the selections and you would say, yeah, all the players who made this team deserve to make it. There was plenty of quality on this squad, but the reality is they just couldn't score a goal. They had plenty of chances offensively in all their matches outside of the Vietnam game doesn't count. That was more of a glorified tune-up than anything else. They just couldn't score goals. They got one goal from Lindsey Horan, and that was it. And they went almost 4 hours of regulation play without scoring. You can question the tactics from head coach Vlatko Andonovski. He almost certainly will not be the U.S. women's national team coach after this contract is up for him. And they had their chances even in this Sweden game, even in the penalty shootout. Sophia Smith, who was poised to be one of the breakout stars of this tournament for the U.S., missed her penalty, which would have sent the Americans through. So it's not like they didn't have their opportunities. They very much did. And credit to Sweden's goalkeeper for making tremendous saves in this contest. But the U.S. had their chances, and ultimately they just couldn't score a goal.
No, they couldn't. And Megan Rapinoe's storybook World Cup career ended in a way that she described just like a sick joke. How important, though, was she throughout her time with U.S. soccer?
Megan Rapinoe is a very decorated U.S. soccer player, and to many a very controversial U.S. soccer player, but her accomplishments speak for themselves. Two-time World Cup winner, gold medalist. She was the Golden Ball and Golden Boot winner in the 2019 World Cup. And obviously her activism off the field has created some controversy. She's deemed as more of a lightning rod in some parts of this country and the world, but to so many other players and people, she's a huge inspiration, and she's likely inspired hundreds of thousands of girls to partake in women's soccer and in women's sports in general. Her work on the equal pay fight for the U.S. women's national team has been tremendous as well, and she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom last year. So when you look at it as as an encompassing a whole body of work for Megan Rapinoe, obviously the missed penalty is going to sit in the back of her mind and sit in the back of the mind of a lot of U.S. fans, but it's hard to think of a player who has better represented the U.S. women's national team and U.S. soccer over the last at least 5 years than Megan Rapinoe.
All right, well, now we are tasked with talking about the World Cup when we don't have the U.S. women's national team to talk about. So we got the final 2 round of 16 matches tomorrow morning. Who's the pick for Colombia and Jamaica?
I actually like Jamaica in this one to advance. Comes in at plus 145 on the DK Sportsbook. I think this is very much a toss-up game. Jamaica, we saw in the group stage, they can defend, and they have some great forwards who just haven't quite been able to click right now. But I think Colombia's coming off a tough game against Morocco, and Jamaica is high on momentum after that late draw against Brazil. They basically staved off several huge attacks from the Brazilians to advance. So give me Jamaica to make the quarterfinal. That comes in at plus 145.
All right, France, huge favorites over Morocco. What's your bet in this one, dude?
As we've seen in this round of 16, even England this morning was a huge favorite, but they went to penalties against Nigeria. So I'm really torn on this one. In terms of taking a bet, I like Morocco on the goal line. You can get them for plus 160 at plus 1.5 goals. If you're not quite feeling that, plus 2.5 goals is minus 165. So giving up a little bit of value there, but I would actually back Morocco in some capacity in this match because these games have been a lot closer than the odds have suggested.
All right, good stuff, Jimmy. That's all the time we have for today. This is what we'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with yours truly, Jesse and Emerson.
Oh,
we'll see you then.
You're here tomorrow? Jesse, cool.